Ember Witch. Book 1. The Lich. Volume 1. Black Tragedy. Chapter 2. The Nightmare Begins. September 8, 457 to October 17, 458 BME. Fragment 6. Clan Brother. Neela approached the outskirts of Tathur, a peculiar little settlement of Fyren just before the plains of central Valsilla. She had a contract on someone in the settlement, but the information she was given didn't specify who exactly she was after. She knew that he was a winter breed, had a missing finger, and talked with a slur, and that was about it. She hated every contract like this. Some poor fool was mugged or robbed, and in an act of revenge, they spend the last of their coin to hire the cinder to hunt their attacker. Most contracts like these had little information given due to incompetence. She was on a hunt for a male Fyren in one of the last settlements before the human kingdom. This was especially annoying to her as Tathur was not in her jurisdiction. No doubt the Morden would be livid if she knew she had traveled this far without contacting her. As far as Neela knew, no Fyren, except on special occasions, would travel into human territory. They never interacted, never traded with humans due to the racial tensions between them. Most humans believed Fyren as bloodthirsty animals because 100 years ago a traveling caravan of humans were slaughtered by a pack of thieves, bandits, and criminals. It wasn't the fault of every Fyren that they were in the wrong place at the wrong time, but the humans quickly spread word that if they traveled to the Far East they would be butchered by animals. She guessed that after the rumor spread throughout the human kingdom, their king forbade any involvement with the Fyren. Her people, instead of trying to mend the relationship, decided to trade with the Orson of the southern desert. They had to travel by boat across the Great Sea or traverse the quickly constructed bridge across the Great Divide. It wasn't the ideal way to travel as the bridge itself was made from ropes and sticks spanning across several miles of water between the southern tip of the heartland and the northern tip of the False Sea. She had been to the south only twice. She admired the beauty of the blue sands that created an illusion of walking in an endless ocean, but could do without the scorching heat. The Orson were a nomadic race of lizard-like people who congregated once every 6 years in the center of the False Sea. She hoped her target wasn't stupid enough to flee to the desert, but it had happened before. She walked into town and watched the many shopkeepers lock up their stores. A pair of children ran back home covered in mud with their mother yelling at them for not only being late but filthy as all could be. It was a small and pathetic town. Around 20 mud huts and a few larger wooden buildings used as shops and housing for the rich and powerful. The issue of hunting Fyren was that most had red fur and from afar could not be distinguished from another. Her target's white fur at least gave her a start, as it wasn't all that common. She only knew 2 people who had white fur, and they were both Mordens. After walking the entire town with no visible sign of her target, she decided to head west and set up camp. It was getting late and she wanted to sleep before she had to take another day's worth of searching the town. She walked from the town and kept her eyes open, but didn't really pay attention to her surroundings due to her exhaustion. After a good 20 minutes of walking, she began to smell smoke and fire, and she perked up. She scanned the horizon and spotted small blue flickers just beyond a patch of trees. She wasn't sure if this was her prey, but she gathered herself in preparation for a fight. She approached the fire quietly and drew her sword ready for anything to happen. Fevra had made it to the outskirts of a small Fyren settlement over the course of a few months of travel. He was trying not to let his emotions get the best of him, but everything he had lost weighed him down immensely. He lost his brother, his home, his pack and his honor all in a single day, and now had to survive in the open plains of the east. He had traveled past the fringe mountains that separated the human kingdom, evergreen forest and the east. He had traversed through empty plains of grass and plateaus that started at the mountain's foothills and into a sparsely wooded land. Still barren and empty, he at least was more comfortable amongst the small woods and farmlands that grew corn, wheat, and other foods for the Fyren. He had set up his camp in a small batch of trees, hoping they would cover the smoke and fire light during the night. He wasn't sure how the townspeople would react to him solely because of his race, so he wanted to scope out the town from a distance for a few days before he moved on or attempted to make contact. He had caught a few small rabbits and a very oddly sized bird and was beginning to prepare the meat for drying as he sat with his back against a tree. He began to tear up and gave into his despair. He threw his sword into the ground at his feet, making it stick deep into the dirt, and placed his head in his hands, letting his sobs go into the night air. The blue flames illuminating his body with an unnatural hue due to his color. It wasn't what he wanted to do, but he couldn't control it anymore. He had broken down like this often over his journey here, and each day that passed his emotions grew harder to handle.
I'm so sorry, Loker. You didn't deserve such a fate. I was supposed to be there for you, take care of you, but I was powerless against it.
He cried out loud, letting his tears drain into his palms. Neela was almost upon the camp when she stopped in her tracks. There was a strange dark pressure coming from the camp that she hadn't felt since encountering Hana for the first time. Its waves of darkness were however overpowered by what she had just heard. Someone was crying like a child. She wasn't sure if there were multiple people around the camp, so she decided to wait for more information. After a few moments of silence other than the sobs, she had her answer. She slowly moved into the tree line, keeping her feet silent. In most cases, using color to silence herself wouldn't work. Most of her targets were mageborn and could feel the energy she put off. She wasn't like Fevra, who could naturally suppress her color until the last moment. Instead, when she used magic, her aura extended out like the sun, blinding everyone around her and letting anyone in a mile radius feel her presence. It was a bad trait to have in the business of blood, so she honed her skills outside of color to make up for her glaring flaw. She breathed lightly and focused on moving as silently as she could. Fevra pulled his head up quickly and flared his teeth. He could smell someone approaching his camp. He moved quietly to his sword, tears still pooling in his eyes, and gripped the handle, pulling it out from the dirt.
Who is there? I can smell you. Come out now, I know you are there.
Fevra called out, trying to keep his voice from showing he had been crying. He was sure whoever was close by had heard him, but now wasn't the time to worry about his embarrassment.
How could he smell me from this far away? No Fyren has that good of a nose, especially with the fire burning so close to him,
Neela thought to herself and stepped closer. As she inched forward, the male turned around, exposing his face in the blue firelight, and Neela nearly gasped. Standing directly in front of her was a muscular, tall and menacing Lyran male. He towered over her like a giant at what she would guess was nearly 6 feet tall. His eyes, although still teary, were a beautiful blue, and his fur was a speckle of gray and black.
I can see you. Come out or I will be forced to take action,
Fevra said with an attempt of intimidation.
It's hard to be tough after you've just been crying, isn't it?
Neela asked as she stepped into the light, sword drawn.
What do you want from me?
Fevra asked, gripping his sword tighter in response to his visitor's weapon.
I am looking for someone and assumed you were him. What is a Lyran doing clear out here? Usually you mutts hide away in the forest,
Neela said, making a small movement forward which caused Fevra to bring his blade up.
I have no intention of telling you,
Fevra replied, watching closely to every move her body made.
Wouldn't think it's for pleasure seeing that you're a wreck right now. Your posture is wrong. Your grip is too tight and you'll have a hard time seeing with those tears in your eyes,
Neela said, taking another step forward. Fevra began to growl and readied himself for combat.
How about a friendly spar between us? I have never tested my blade against a Lyran before. I would like to see what you're made of,
she asked politely and raised her blade in a ready stance.
Fine then, I guess I have little choice,
Fevra replied and took the first move. He swung at a downward slash and Neela stepped to the side, grabbing his arm and twisted the blade from his hands. Fevra stumbled and grabbed his sword from the ground, then attacked again, this time upwards. Neela blocked the slash with ease and shoved him back. Fevra took 3 steps backwards and felt heat on his back. He glanced behind him to see he was inches from the fire. Using his distracted mind against him, Neela rushed forward and grabbed him by his shirt, then spun using his weight to fling him forward away from the fire and face first into the ground.
Sloppy, very sloppy. I told you that your posture was off and you were gripping your blade too tightly. Is this the best you can do?
Neela asked with a smirk as Fevra stood up.
Then why challenge me? If you knew you would win, then why waste your time?
He asked and readied himself again, this time more focused and sure-footed.
You needed an ass-kicking. Whatever you are going through will pass in time. We all have shit to cry over, but in the heat of battle everything fades away,
Neela replied and then attacked. She struck out with 3 swings. One high, one mid and one low, and each was deflected by Fevra.
Good. You are paying attention to my movements and reading each attack,
she said and attacked again, this time the reverse of her first 3 strikes. Fevra blocked 2 of them, then parried the third, giving him an opening for his attack. He strengthened his grip and swung high, but was easily blocked, and in a flash a second attack blurred into motion. A purple bolt of energy appeared above Neela and shot down towards Fevra. He felt the surge of color before it appeared and jumped back, pushing his offhand out, throwing a wave of blue energy into Neela. Both of them fumbled backwards, dodging the color by mere inches.
I thought this was a spar, not a magic contest?
Fevra asked with a grunt as he stood up from the ground.
You must be prepared for anything in battle. Most people can use magic, and if you aren't prepared for it, then you're good as dead,
laughed Neela, who had rolled onto her feet immediately after the wave of magic ended.
What is this all about? Shouldn't you be looking for your friend instead of playing games like this?
Fevra asked as he readied himself for another pass.
It's always been part of my duty to find worthy mages to join my family. I see something in you, something you probably don't see in yourself,
Neela replied, but she put her blade away. Fevra looked puzzled. He thought over what she meant but didn't quite understand.
What are you talking about?
He asked, trying to keep his focus on her energy.
Let's just say that in my line of work your Lyran traits would benefit us greatly,
Neela said, looking over his muscular figure.
And what work would you be talking about? You aren't exactly being open with me.
Fevra replied, letting his mind wander over the possibilities.
You are far from home, you have no one and nothing. Whatever happened to you, it has left you scared and wounded. I am offering you a place to go and a family who will help you realize your fate. I can see it in your eyes. You were destined for something great and had it ripped away from you. Come with me and I will help you begin a new life. A better life. I am putting it all on the table for you to take. My name is Neela. It's a pleasure to meet you,
she said, then bowed to him.
Why should I trust you? You haven't really shown any good reason after sneaking up on me in the middle of the night,
Fevra replied, then took a few steps back from her.
You have no reason to, I understand that. If you are not comfortable with coming along with me, you are free to stay here. I only offer a choice,
she said, then turned around and began walking away.
My name is Fevra,
he said quickly, before she could get too far away. She turned around with a smile.
All right, Fevra, are you ready to begin a new life?
Neela asked and held out her hand. Fevra put his hand out and they gripped tightly. Although she hadn't found her prey, what she did find was far more valuable than a few coins she would have gotten from the kill. They had slept at the camp Fevra had made that night and were now on the road heading east. She only had 1 horse, but she had enough money to buy a second for Fevra. They were side by side, but Fevra was having trouble keeping to a straight line due to his inexperience with riding horses.
You're going to get used to it, trust me. It's far better than walking, that's for sure,
Neela said while trying not to laugh at his struggles.
Yeah, and I'm sure I will also get used to whatever I will be doing as well. You still haven't told me what it is either. How about giving me some information before we arrive?
Fevra said, pulling up closer to Neela.
We are contract killers. A clan of assassins essentially. Depending on your skills, you could be a hunter or a contractor. Your natural hunting skills would make you the perfect candidate for a hunter, but I can't guarantee you that position. You will be tested on your color, tracking and combat skills. If you pass the trials you will be assigned a job and a partner. It's brutal work. You must have a steel heart and no remorse for your target, otherwise you could falter,"
Neela said, putting it as bluntly as she could, and Fevra shook his head in surprise.
"So you're a criminal?"
he asked hesitantly.
"No, our organization is sanctioned by the Morden herself. Although she can't be officially connected to the clan, she allows for us to carry out our contracts with no intervention from the law. Think of it as a shadow organization. We get paid to kill those who are criminals and keep the profits, while the Morden gets to keep a peaceful society running,"
Neela said, trying to reassure Fevra about what he is getting himself into.
"Tell me about this Morden,"
Fevra said, still struggling to keep his horse in line.
"Essentially each city has a Morden. She acts as a sort of matriarch over each major city. There are 4 holds, each containing a major city or town and smaller villages within its borders. Then there is the Dermorden, who is the head matriarch over each hold. Kaisha is the Morden of Myopia, which is where we are headed. You will meet her soon enough,"
Neela answered, trying her best to keep from gaining distance from him.
"Let's hope she likes me,"
Fevra said with a grin while he finally got control over his horse. It took them a month to travel from the outskirts of Fyren territory into the heartland. The snow had begun to fall, making it more difficult to travel, but they managed. They practiced combat and magic after setting up camp and told stories from their people's history when they sat around the fire. Fevra was beginning to connect with Neela. Not in any romantic way, but on a level he hadn't known before. It was as if they had meant to meet. He felt like she had his back if anything was to happen, and he would have hers. It wasn't a friendship like he had before, more like a sister he never had. After being on the road with her for over a month, he had gotten used to her presence. Her inability to keep her magic contained when she got excited, or her subtle way she breathed when she slept. He could lay there just listening to her all night. It comforted him to have someone at his side again after so long.
"Loker, if only you could be here,"
he whispered as he stared up at the night sky. The sun came up with a blend of color, and Neela sat up, then scratched her ear with pleasure in her eyes.
"Oh Cetra, that's the spot,"
she moaned out in fires, then turned to Fevra's empty bedroll. She stood up and exited the tent, looking around her for her companion. He was standing next to a large rock, staring into the rising sun and the sky of color.
"I couldn't sleep last night, so I came out here to think. I am thankful for your kindness, Neela, I truly am,"
Fevra said with a sigh.
"There is no need to thank me, Fevra. We are 2 months from Myopia, then you can get a good night's sleep before you meet your clan brothers and sisters,"
Neela replied, placing her hand on his shoulder.
"Sleep would be nice right about now. I haven't had a comfortable bed in years, it seems,"
Fevra said with a slight smirk.
"That's the spirit. Now let's pack up and get a move on. We're almost home,"
Neela said, then turned around and walked back to their tiny camp. Fevra stood there for a few moments longer in the cold winter air, then turned to the camp and left his feelings behind. When they finally reached Myopia, Fevra was awestruck by its beauty. The tiny town he had camped at before meeting Neela was nothing like this. The architecture of that settlement was just dirt and log homes, but Myopia was something entirely different. The elegantly designed wooden structures that curved and swirled into the air, paired with the thin white walls and red color palette, made him look like a tiny gray blob amongst it all. He had known the Fyren cities were impressive from the stories he had heard, but he didn't expect this. They passed signs and buildings sporting swirling etchings he couldn't read. To his eyes, their written language was just a collection of curving lines, but he could see the beauty of it the longer he looked around him. It wasn't like any other place he had ever seen. Not even the great cherry blossom city was this elegantly designed. They passed children playing some sort of game involving a small ball and a stick. One child would throw the ball, and the one holding the stick would attempt to hit the ball. If they did manage to hit the ball, they would run from their position to a designated square, and another child would grab the stick and repeat the cycle. Various shops and food stands selling beautifully crafted jewelry and delicious-smelling food dotted the roads, with both men and women alike trading coins. The clothing was something fantastic. A blend of silk robes and dresses intermingled with baggy but well-crafted shirts and pants. Two-toed shoes and wooden sandals made up the footwear. Everyone looked like they lived in a world of riches, with a clear break from gender norms. It made both Fevra and Nila look poor and uncultured by comparison. Everything about this city was alien to him. He had never seen such a unified and beautiful place like this before. He looked down to his sweat-soaked and dirt-covered clothes and felt embarrassed.
Don't worry about what you look like, Fevra. This is the upper district. Everyone here has the pathetic luxury of having money. Someday you will look past their appearance and see them for what they are. Sheep.
Nila said, leading him past several groups of people all wearing the finest clothing.
What do you mean by that? I have nothing to be ashamed of. My life before this was that of a hunter. I need no riches or fancy things to keep me happy,
he replied, trying to keep his jealousy in check.
We will stop at that building and get you cleaned up before your meeting with the Morden tomorrow. I'll leave you my room for the night,
Nila said as she pointed out a large building with steam flowing from several chimneys on its roof. Fevra looked at the building and saw several men and women exiting wearing silk robes with slightly wet fur. As they approached the building, he finally realized what it was.
A bathhouse? You have a room at a bathhouse?
He asked with a smirk.
It's more than just a bathhouse. It's the finest inn of the upper district,
Nila said, and then dismounted her horse. Fevra followed her, and they tied their horses up, then walked up the large staircase to the entrance. Inside was even more impressive than the outside. In the center of the lobby was a large fountain with 4 intricately carved Baramoto, their feline features a sign of power and grace, each holding a crystal ball in its paws. A large spiraling column sat in the middle, with several bird-like creatures perched upon spigots flowing hot water from them. Nila stepped up to the counter and arranged for her room, new clothes and a bath for Fevra, who was so distracted by the fountain that he didn't notice the stares of everyone around him.
This way, please,
a young woman said behind Fevra, which awoke him from his trance. He turned around to see a room full of Fyren staring and muttering things to each other. He followed the woman through several hallways, up a flight of stairs and into a chamber with a massive tub. The steam escaped the room as she opened the door.
I will give you as long as you need, sir. If you require any assistance, just ring that bell and I will help,
the young woman said, then stepped past Nila, who was just now coming through the hallway.
They will show you to my room, feed you and give you a change of clothing. I have business to attend to and will return for you in the morning. It was a pleasure traveling with you, Fevra. Do relax tonight, okay?
Nila said, then bowed.
To you as well. Thank you for the hospitality,
Fevra said and bowed back. Nila smiled, then left. Fevra shut the door and looked around the room. There were spigots on the wall, directly in front of him, each with a little handle. One of them was pouring water into the tub with steam drifting off of it. The other one wasn't flowing any water at all. He noticed several bars of white paste sitting on the edge of the tub and one in the water breaking down into a foam that bubbled up to the surface of the water. He didn't know exactly what they were, but the smell of lavender and honey drifted through the air. He peeled off his dirt-crusted clothes, then placed his foot into the tub and almost screamed. He pulled his foot out quickly, then tested the water with his hand and again almost yelled out in pain. After licking his hand better, he turned the handle on the spigot that wasn't flowing and felt cold water flow out of it. He turned the hot water off and let the cold water flow for a moment, then tested the bath. After feeling the heat settle, he got into the tub and soaked in the warm water, letting it wash over him. After 20 minutes, he began to scrub his body. The dirt and grime that had covered him washed away into the water. He could smell the sweet aroma of the bars that sat next to him and assumed he was supposed to use them on his fur. He had bathed before, but not like this. It was in the cold rivers of the forest where he would simply get the dirt washed off. He ran the bar across his fur and it broke away into a thin foam that smelled oh so sweet. After he had done that he dunked himself under the water and let the foam flow off of him. His muscles seemed to relax and relish in the warm water, making him never want to leave, but he knew the young woman was awaiting him outside. He stepped out of the tub and saw a shelf with a stack of towels and robes. He grabbed a towel and dried himself as best as he could, then put on a robe. He opened the door and walked into the hall.
"This way, sir,"
the young woman said after a bow. He followed her to the room and entered to see the biggest bed he had ever seen in his life.
"I have left a new set of clothing on the bed for you. Dinner will be in an hour. Please make yourself comfortable,"
the woman said, then left him alone. He put on the clothes, being taken aback by how comfortable they were despite being a bit loose on his body, then sat on the bed with an audible sigh as he sank into the soft material it was composed of. He tried to keep his emotions from welling back up, but he relented and let the tears flow. It had been over 5 months since his exile, yet he still felt like it had only happened yesterday. His heart ached from the loss of his brother, and he could only blame himself for it. He lost track of time and found that it had been an hour since he sat in the bed. A small knock came from the door and in walked a pair of young male Fyren pushing a cart of food. He looked stunned by the amount of food that was before him. He never went hungry before his exile, and even during the first 2 months he had his hunting skills to rely upon, but the meager amount of food he had managed to get was just a single plate worth from this tray. A thick yellow soup, a bowl of rice, and more sat in front of him just begging to be eaten.
The chef was informed that you might be hungry beyond our standard serving sizes, so we upscaled your meal as a thanks for your service,
one of the males said, then bowed. Fevra couldn't say anything before they were out the door. He licked his lips and dug in, allowing the food to push away his sorrow.